Out of all the different things that you're doing to improve your health, the way that you're exercising, that is exercising correctly, can have the greatest power in determining not just how long you will live, but also being healthy for the rest of your life. Now, this seems obvious, right? Because exercising is good for us. But if you want to maximize this, there are 3 keys to exercising correctly. They are 1, improving your aerobic capacity, 2, improving your strength, and 3, improving your stability. Now I'm going to go over all 3 of these in detail, so make sure you stick around. Now we know that any amount of exercise will improve your health. There's multiple studies that show that people who do not exercise versus people who regularly exercise, those people who exercise regularly will live up to a decade longer than those who don't. And you don't need to exercise that long to improve your health. There was a massive study looking at over 400,000 people, and they found that just going from 0 exercising to exercising just 90 minutes in a week will improve your risk of all-cause mortality by 14%. So that means at any given point in time, you will have a 14% lower risk of dying by just exercising 90 minutes in a week. So if you're someone that doesn't exercise at all, never gets off the couch, I'm not judging, but this can be a huge motivation that even adding a brisk walk a couple times a week can help you live longer. But at the same time, if you have been exercising your whole life, there are probably some simple things you can add to your routine to help make sure that you are maximizing these health benefits. Now, why is this so important in our modern day world? Well, this is the real problem where medicine is lacking, and this is where we need to supplement with other things. Because medicine right now is really great at helping us if we are sick. But it doesn't do much more than that. If we want to prevent ourselves from getting sick and we want to maximize our health benefits, then medicine doesn't really help us there. For example, when's the last time that your doctor actually assessed your strength or actually checked your aerobic fitness and saw what fitness level you were at? These are clearly things that are very important to being healthy, but I'm willing to bet that your doctor never asked you about this because my doctor never asked me about this, and most doctors hardly ever even learn about fitness. And this is the problem because we call it healthcare, but there's so much that is lacking in helping people's healthcare. It's only after you actually get injured or you get some sort of disease that you can actually get treatment by a doctor. Now, this is what I want to change. I really think we need to start taking more accountability of our own health. Think of it kind of like a physical therapy before you actually need physical therapy. Right now, if you're an average person, you are most likely going to get a chronic disease. And most of the time, people in the later stages of their life, they cannot enjoy the things that they used to do. And they can hardly even move the way that they used to. So that life becomes very miserable. Now, I'm not trying to scare you or anything, but I'm just telling you the reality that a lot of us are going to face. And this is where exercising and working out comes in. Because if you do this earlier on, it will pay massive dividends later on in life. Now, this is some data from the CDC. They found that the leading cause of accidental deaths from people 65 and older is falling, literally falling down. And this is not even counting the people who fall and then later die a year later because of some sort of other problem that stemmed from that fall. And this is where having enough muscle mass and specifically muscular strength is so important because the more muscular strength that you have, the longer it will delay death in a situation like this and the healthier it will keep you. Simply having more muscle will protect you in a lot of different ways, whether you are recovering from a surgery or preventing yourself from falling in the first place because you have more muscle and you can stabilize yourself, or even recovering from a fall because you're less likely to get injured. Now, why is it that building muscle early on is so important? Well, the reason is because as you age, your muscles will start to atrophy. That is, your muscles will basically start to go away. They'll start to disappear. This is called sarcopenia, basically the loss of muscle mass as you get older. That's why in a nutshell, your goal should be to maintain as much muscle mass and muscular strength early on to help mitigate this loss. A simple way to think about this is basically anything that you're able to do right now, comfortably. Just know that that will get a lot more difficult the older that you get. Let's say that your goal in your 70s is to be able to hike different mountains. This is how you want to enjoy your retirement. Now let's say that right now you're in your 30s, 40s, or 50s. Well, if you're able to comfortably hike those mountains right now, that's great. But what's going to happen as you get older. When you're in your 30s, that's when your muscular strength will be at its peak. And after every decade or so, it'll start to decline by 8 to 17% on average. Now, that's going to accelerate every single decade. So every single decade, you're going to lose more and more, faster and faster. So if you are in your 40s and you want to hike a mountain, and it's kind of a challenge right now, that's going to be a lot harder for you to do in your 70s, because that's basically 30 years of your muscle rapidly declining. And it's going to be a lot harder for you to do the same things that you're doing in your 40s. So if your goal is to comfortably be able to walk different mountains and hike different mountains in your 70s, then you have to be able to comfortably do 2 to 3 times that output right now. So that means not just being able to walk up this mountain, you have to be able to run up this mountain. It's no secret that if you're more physically fit, you're more likely to live longer. If you take someone in the bottom quarter of their overall fitness for their age group, and this is actually measured in their VO2 max, which I'm going to get to in a bit. But if you take someone in the bottom quarter of their overall fitness and you compare that to someone in the top quarter of their overall fitness, the person in the bottom quarter of their overall fitness is 4 times more likely to die at any point in time compared to the person that is in the top quarter of their overall fitness. Now, this is something called all-cause mortality. Basically, it means that at any given point in time, that person is 4 times more likely to die than that person that is more physically fit than them. So simply changing your fitness bracket or becoming more physically fit can have such a big impact on how long you're going to live. Now, medicine doesn't give us any drugs that can give us this much of a benefit and this much of an impact on our overall health. Nothing right now can give us a 4 times higher likelihood of staying alive. This is why being physically fit is so important. And this is why if you simply start exercising and start moving your body, it can have probably the biggest impact on your overall health compared to literally anything else that you're doing. Now, if you want to improve your overall fitness and you want to do it in a way that actually improves your aerobic capacity and actually promotes you to live longer and healthier, you want to focus on 2 things. So the first is improving your VO2 max, and number 2 is increasing your zone 2 training. I'm going to go into detail on both of these, but both of these will help each other. So if you increase one, it's going to help you with the other. Now let's start with VO2 max. VO2 max is basically a measure of your fitness, and it's probably one of the best measurements we have right now to measure your fitness. It's defined as the maximum rate of oxygen consumption available during exercise. Basically, it means that when you're exercising, how much oxygen can your body transport to all your different organs? Your goal should be to have a higher VO2 max. The higher VO2 max that you have, the more fit that you are. Now, there are different ways to measure your VO2 max. The most accurate way is going to be by actually going to a lab, and they'll probably hook you up with a mask and check your heart rate and everything like that. But just know that if you're improving your fitness, you are improving your VO2 max. So for example, if you're going out to run a mile and then you cut your mile time off by a minute, then you're definitely going to be improving your VO2 max. Now, there was a study I wanted to show that really showed the importance of improving your VO2 max. This study was in the Journal of American College of Cardiology, and it was looking at 750,000 US veterans, and it was assessing their overall fitness. What they found is even someone with a below average, just a below average VO2 max, not anything in the bottom quartile. If someone had below average VO2 max, they had more than double the risk of dying compared to someone in the fittest group. And after this study, the authors even noted that being unfit was a greater risk than any other cardiac risk factor measured. So what are the other cardiac risk factors that were measured? So these are things like type 2 diabetes, congestive heart failure, high blood pressure, even history of previous heart attacks. So that means that if you are physically unfit or even below average in your fitness, that means that you had a greater risk to your health than someone who had a previous heart attack or some of these other cardiac events. So you can see that increasing your VO2 max by any amount will not just improve your workout and improve your ability to exercise, it'll definitely improve your overall health and your life. And this further shows the importance of exercising and the dangers of someone that doesn't exercise. So we need to move our bodies. And there was another study also showing that if you exercise, it can even reverse your aging. This study was looking at elderly people's VO2 max, and they were able to increase it by 6 milliliters per kilogram per minute. So basically by 25%. This had the equivalent of reducing their age by 12 whole years. Now this should be everyone's goal. Everyone's goal should be to increase their VO2 max because it essentially can shave a decade off your life. So that way, if you're in your 70s, you're moving like a 60-year-old. And if you increase it even more, you can potentially start moving like a 50-year-old. What you don't want to do is you don't want to shoot for average because we've seen that an average person is going to most likely die from a chronic disease and their later years of life are going to be miserable and they're not going to be able to do the things that they want to do. So you need to start taking action as early as possible. So how can you increase your VO2 max? Well, there's something called VO2 max training. Basically, the intensity of VO2 max training is going to be slightly less than all out. So you're not going to be doing an all out sprint, but you're going to be doing something close to that. And you can do this whether you're running or whether you're cycling or whether you're swimming or going on a rowing machine. It doesn't really matter which form you're doing as long as you're getting the right intensity. So let's say you're going to go for a run. The way to do this would be to run for 4 minutes at the maximum pace you can do to sustain those 4 minutes. So basically, it's going to be a very intense run for 4 minutes. So you can't sprint for 4 minutes, but you want to go slightly below that. Then after those 4 minutes, you want to recover. So you're going to do like a slight jog for 4 minutes to recover. When you're recovering, you want to get as close as you can to recovery because you're going to do it again. You're going to repeat this exercise about 4 to 6 times. So it's kind of like an extended HIIT workout. So you're not going all out, but you're going slightly below that, but you are still allowing your body to recover and you're doing it multiple times. And what you're going to find is this pace is going to be different for everyone. So someone's going to be more fit. They might be able to go like 10 miles per hour for 4 minutes. And a different person will probably struggle just doing a brisk walk for 4 minutes. So everyone's going to have their own personal way of doing this. So it's going to be hard to give an exact workout plan for anybody. Now, what the studies are showing is that you only need to add one of these VO2 max training sessions per week. So you can add more if you want, and that'll definitely help improve your VO2 max, but adding one is enough. Now, another way to improve your VO2 max is by focusing on your breathing. Now, specifically, I'm talking about practicing high altitude training, but not by going to these mountains. So there's a way to actually simulate high altitude training at home. Basically, the way to think about this is when people go to a high altitude to train and these different athletes go to these higher mountains to train, they're depriving themselves of oxygen. Because when they go to these higher altitudes, it's harder because there's less oxygen supply. That way, when they come back to the mainlands for their UFC event or their track race or whatever they're doing, that they're at a much higher advantage because they've been training in low oxygen conditions. But there's a way to naturally do this high altitude training at home. And it involves holding your breath. So you can do a breath holding workout, again, while you're running or rowing or cycling, but I would not recommend it when you're swimming because any form of breath manipulation when you're in water will obviously increase your risk of drowning. So only for the very professional people, I would recommend that. And also, I would advise you to talk to your doctor to see if there's any risks for you specifically before you do this. But the way to do this is, let's say you're going for a run. So the first minute of that run, you don't want to do any breath holding, just warm up and ease into your run. And then after that first minute, you can practice your breath holding. So the key is with the breath holding is you want to do it after an exhale through your nose. So while you're running, you're going to exhale normally through your nose, and then you're going to hold your nose. You don't have to hold your nose if you're around people, just hold your breath. So then you're going to hold this until you get a medium to strong urge to breathe. The key here is not to go all out because one, you're running, and also it's not going to help. You don't want to do this until you absolutely have to take a breath. You want to do it a little bit before that. And actually, if you wait too long while holding your breath, you're actually going to get some diminished returns, and you're probably going to have to abandon the exercise to recover, so you're not going to get all the benefits. So make sure you're doing it correctly. Now again, getting a medium to strong urge to breathe can be different for everybody. Some people will be at a higher level of fitness, and they can hold their breath for 10 seconds while they're running. And some people will only be able to do 2 seconds. So let's say that you're running and you decide that after 10 steps, that's a pretty medium to strong urge for me to breathe. So after 10 steps, I'm going to recover. Or for someone else, you'll have a stopwatch and you'll be running and then you'll hold your breath and you'll see 10 seconds go by on that stopwatch and then you'll be able to recover. I personally do this while practicing cycling. So if I'm on a cycle, I will try to hold my breath for 10 seconds and then after that 10 seconds, I will recover. So the trick with your recovery is you want to only use your nose to recover and you want to recover for about 30 seconds to a minute. So for someone who's more of a beginner, I would suggest that they do the full minute. And for someone who's more advanced, then you can come down to 30 seconds. Now, when you recover, it's normal for those first 2 to 3 breaths to be big inhales because you're basically supplying your body of oxygen again. But after that, it should be back to normal breathing to recover. If you have to keep taking these big breaths or you feel like you're out of breath, then you probably held your breath too long. And at this point, I would suggest you abandon the exercise and then recover fully and then try again. So this will be another good assessment of your VO2 max because the longer you're able to hold your breath while doing this activity and the more intense that activity is, the higher your VO2 max is going to be. So when you're doing this breath hold training, you want to repeat this exercise about 10 times. So basically you're doing 10 reps of this breath hold cycling where you're holding your breath, recovering for a minute, and then holding your breath, recovering for a minute, and 10 total times. Now, why exactly does this breath holding work to improve your VO2 max? Well, I go into more detail on this on some other videos, specifically talking about your breath work, and I'm going to put a link in the description below where I talked about that in a different podcast. But basically, what you're doing when you're holding your breath is you are depriving your body of oxygen, kind of like a high altitude environment, and you're also increasing your body's CO2 or carbon dioxide. Initially, this is going to be hard because you're basically lowering your body's oxygen saturation. But what your body does is your body kind of adapts to this deprived state of oxygen. So one way it does this is, again, because you have higher carbon dioxide, that you're going to have higher delivery of oxygen to your cells. So this is called the Bohr effect. So when you have higher levels of CO2, then more of the oxygen that gets into your body will get delivered to all of your cells. So to help explain this, let's say an average person will breathe in oxygen. That oxygen will attach to a molecule called hemoglobin, and that hemoglobin will carry your oxygen inside of your red blood cells, and it'll carry that oxygen to all of the different organs in your body. But if your CO2 levels are too low, then this oxygen will never detach from that hemoglobin. So that means that even though you get oxygen into your body, it's never going to get delivered to your cells. You really need to have enough CO2 as well to make sure that this oxygen can get detached from this hemoglobin and actually get delivered to all the right places. So basically what this breath holding is doing is it's building up your body's CO2 tolerance. And by having a higher amount of CO2 tolerance, your oxygen delivery will get way more efficient. And this is part of the reason why people go to these high altitudes to train in these low oxygen conditions to build up their CO2 tolerance. Now, the second reason that this works is when you deprive your body of oxygen, your body will start to make its own red blood cells to make up for this lack of oxygen. So your body will sense that it's not getting enough oxygen from the air around you, so your spleen will start to contract and produce more red blood cells because your red blood cells, again, are what carry your oxygen to all of your cells. So although you have less oxygen surrounding you, now you have higher transporters or more of these trains that carry this oxygen to all of your cells. Now, the third reason that this works is because of something called EPO, or a molecule called erythropoietin. Erythropoietin is this hormone that's produced in your kidneys. And its two functions are to protect our red blood cells and also to stimulate the growth of more red blood cells. So again, it's doing the same thing as before. When you have this deprived oxygen, now your kidneys are going to make this EPO, and this EPO is going to provide even more red blood cells to help carry even more oxygen to all of your cells. Now, basically what this is doing is a legal form of blood doping. So if you've never heard of blood doping before, this is what the Tour de France was famous for with so many cheaters. So the way that a lot of different people would cheat is they would do a blood transfusion. So they would remove a lot of their blood about a few weeks before any major event that they have to do. And in doing so, their body would sense this loss of blood and produce more red blood cells naturally. But then closer to their event, they would transfuse the same blood back into their body. So they're influxing all of these red blood cells into their body. So now that they have this artificially really high red blood cell count. So they have this huge amount of oxygen transporters because they have so many red blood cells. And this will make their oxygen delivery to their cells so much more efficient than someone who wasn't cheating. But luckily, we have a safe and legal way of doing this, and that's by simulating the high altitude training. Again, I have another video where I go into more detail on this and more detail on your breath work, and I'm putting that link in the description below for that podcast. Now, another way to improve your aerobic efficiency is by doing zone 2 training. So you might have heard of different zones in different workout programs, like if you go to Orange Theory Fitness and they have these different zones for you to work out in, or different coaches have these different zones. Basically what they mean is zone 1 is kind of like a walk in the park. It's basically a really easy, it's not even considered a workout. And then zone 5, or whatever the last zone is, it's basically an all-out sprint. So you are going as hard as you possibly can. So if zone 1 is really easy and zone 5 is the hardest it can be, zone 2 is probably still on the easier side. In a nutshell, zone 2 training is when you're training at a speed that's slow enough that you can still have a conversation with someone, but fast enough where that conversation is a little strained. So if you can easily have a full conversation with someone, then you're probably in zone 1. If you can still have a full conversation with someone, but it's getting a little difficult to maintain that conversation, then that's zone 2. But if you cannot really form full sentences without breathing too hard, then now you're probably in zone 3. So that's kind of your threshold where you want to stay in, and that's how you stay in zone 2. Now again, just like different forms of exercise, this is going to be different for everyone. So it's going to be hard for me to say exactly what to do for you because everyone's fitness level is different. For some people, doing a brisk walk will be their zone 2. And for other people, doing a decent running pace will be their zone 2 because they're so physically fit. Now you can do this again while cycling, rowing, or running, even swimming, but swimming is going to be a little hard because you can't really talk when you're swimming. But the study showed that the best way to do zone 2 training is getting 3 hours in per week. So that's going to be about 4 45-minute sessions every single week. Now again, if you want, you can definitely do more than this, but that's what the studies are showing gets you the best benefit by doing at least this much. Now zone 2 training is going to be most important for people who are not athletes. Now it's still important for athletes, but the reason it's more important for people who are not athletes is because they get the most benefit from it. It's kind of like if someone who smoked 1 cigarette a week versus someone who smoked a pack a day, if they both quit smoking. Obviously, the person who quit a pack a day would get the most benefit from it. But if you do more zone 2 training, then this will improve your endurance for pretty much everything in life. And it does this by improving the efficiency of your mitochondria. So if you remember from biology class, the mitochondria are basically the powerhouse in your cells. And they are what take different molecules like glucose or fat, and they turn it into a molecule called ATP, which is your body's energy source. Now, this is the main reason why zone 2 training is so beneficial, because your mitochondria are the only thing that can burn both fat and glucose. And this is what someone who has a metabolic disorder, or someone like type 2 diabetes, or some other problem with their metabolism, this is what they really struggle with, because they really struggle burning fat. And the reason that they struggle burning fat is because their mitochondria have gotten inefficient. So basically they have these bad mitochondria that aren't working properly. So they can burn glucose, no problem. But when it comes to burning fat, they really struggle. In general, when you exercise at a lower intensity, it will burn more fat. And when you exercise at a higher intensity, it will burn more glucose. So if you are someone who is healthier, then you're going to have really good mitochondria. And you're going to have no problem either burning glucose or fat. And this is what's called metabolic flexibility. But again, if you are someone who's metabolically unhealthy, then it's going to be a lot harder for you to burn this fat. So you can be doing the same exact workout as someone who's healthy, but that person who's healthy will burn more fat than you, which is really ironic because the person who needs to burn the most fat is someone who is unhealthy. And this is where your zone 2 training comes in, because when you're training in zone 2, then you're only using your slow twitch muscle fibers. Now, your slow twitch muscle fibers are really dense with these mitochondria. And also, when you're doing this lower intensity workout, you're not generating as much lactate. You probably heard of lactic acid before. That is what creates that burning feeling. So when you do a really hard, intense workout and you get that burning feeling, it's because you were using more of your fast twitch muscle fibers and generating more of that lactate. Doing those types of workouts are good too. And I don't want to shun you away from doing your all-out max. But if you want to focus on longevity and improving your health, then zone 2 training is very, very important. And this is kind of the hard part of doing zone 2 training because it's not that difficult to do. You're basically jogging in a pace where you can have a conversation with someone, and you're doing this like 4 times a week for 45 minutes at a time. That doesn't seem like you're doing that much, but you are getting a ton out of it, especially for someone who, again, is metabolically unhealthy. And the thing is that even if you are metabolically healthy, you should still be doing zone 2 training because it's still going to improve your mitochondria. It's going to help improve fat burning. It's also going to help improve your VO2 max. And it's also going to help improve your overall endurance. So when you're doing zone 2 training, you want to keep your heart rate at about 70 to 85% of your maximum heart rate. So what exactly is your maximum heart rate? Well, it's not the calculation that you get based on your height and weight or whatever. It's whatever the highest heart rate you've ever seen when you're doing a workout. So if you're ever doing like a really intense sprint and then you measure your heart rate while doing it and you're like, holy crap, that's the highest my heart rate I've ever seen. Well, that is your maximum heart rate. Now, another reason that doing zone 2 training is so important for anybody, whether you're unhealthy or a healthy person, is again because of your mitochondria. As you get older, your mitochondria will start to decline in number and also efficiency. So if you improve the health of your mitochondria earlier on, then this is going to really help offset this decline. And also, the more cardio that you do, the more new efficient mitochondria that you create. So by doing zone 2 training, not only are you keeping your mitochondria healthy, you're also producing more new efficient mitochondria. So I think a really simple way to do this is by combining it with your strength workout. So if you're spending, let's say, 2 hours in the gym, spend the first 45 minutes doing this zone 2 training, and then the rest of your workout, you can spend weightlifting. One of the worst things about getting older is that we lose muscle. And this decline doesn't start too late. It starts in our 30s. But if you want to focus on living as long as possible and as healthy as possible, then your muscles are very important. Not just your muscle mass, actually more specifically, your muscular strength is one of the most important things. And actually the scary part about this is you lose muscle strength about 2 to 3 times faster than you lose muscle mass. And that's because we get atrophy, or basically the dying off of our fast twitch muscle fibers. So that means that earlier on, your training really has to be focused on strength training, and that includes heavy strength training. So does that mean that if you are a guy that's new to the gym and you've never benched 225 before to go put on 2 plates and try it for the first time? No, obviously you want to do it in a safe way. But there's way too many people that stop caring about their strength as they get older. I know a ton of people who are in their 20s and 30s who say, oh, I just want to maintain my muscle. And they go do a really light workout in the gym because they don't want to get injured. But what's going to happen when you get older? You're just going to start losing some of that muscle strength, and you're not going to be able to do some of the same workouts that you've been doing. And this is why so many people, when they get older, they have such a hard time doing the things that they used to love doing when they were younger. And they start having a hard time going on a walk, or even getting up and out of a chair, or just moving in general. Now, the other problem with muscle is we lose muscle a lot faster than we gain it. And you probably know this too. If you ever went on vacation for a week and you were out partying and you didn't really hit the gym, then that 1 week alone can do a lot of detrimental effects on your body. And this is true even for people who have been working out for a long period of time. I know there's this big misconception that if you've been working out for a long period of time, that you can kind of get away with not working out for a couple weeks. No, even if you've been working out for a long period of time, even a short period of not working out can quickly have you lose your muscle mass. So this is why that if I'm going out of town for a week, I still make it a priority to make sure I get some time in the gym and train. You know, if you think about our ancestors, We as humans were not designed to be sedentary and just relax on a beach for 7 days at a time. We were constantly moving and constantly hunting, basically constantly working out 24/7. So keeping our bodies active, even at times where we want to leisure and just relax, is so important. Working out should never be skipped, and exercising should never be ignored. And there's some studies that really show how fast you can lose your muscle mass and how hard it is to gain it back. So one study was looking at 12 healthy volunteers with an average age of about 67. And they put these people on bed rest for 10 days. And after those 10 days, they lost 3.3 pounds of lean muscle. And another study was looking at 62 seniors, and they had them engage in this strength training. And after 6 months, about half of them didn't even gain any muscle. But luckily, they also didn't lose any muscle mass. So at least they were able to maintain their muscle. Now, this is why it's so important to do exercises more earlier on to help mitigate these losses that we're pretty much guaranteed to have. Now, when it comes to strength training, when you want to focus on your health and overall how long you can live, there are 4 things to focus on. Number 1 is your grip strength. Number 2 is eccentric and concentric training. And number 3 is pulling motions. And number 4 is focus on your legs. So I'm going to go over all 4 of those in detail, but basically these 4 things are the most essential things to live a longer and healthier life. So when it comes to strength, one of the best indicators for how strong you are is how many heavy things can you carry. And the reason for this is because this is how we evolved. No other animal can carry things the way that us humans can. No other animals have 2 arms where they can hold their grocery bags and bring it into their house. You know, I'm always the one to carry luggage in the airport, and I actually enjoy it. I'm one of those weirdos that I avoid taking the escalator because I like to walk up the stairs by holding my 2 bags. Now, carrying things and focusing on your grip strength are things that are really easy to incorporate in your workout. I mean, just carrying your dumbbells from wherever you got them to wherever you're going to work out and actually racking them. Please don't be one of those people that do not rack your weights. Just doing that is going to engage your grip strength. Another really good way to do this is farmer's walks. So if you've never heard of this before, basically you take 2 dumbbells or you take 2 kettlebells and you walk for about a minute at a time. Now, this is also why I don't use straps when I work out at the gym. You know, a lot of people, when they're deadlifting really heavy weights, they don't want to lose their grip strength because the first thing that'll go is usually your grip strength and not your back strength when you're doing a deadlift. So they'll use these straps so that they don't have to hold the bar as hard. Now, me personally, I'm not training to set a new PR. I want to make sure I also get my grip strength when I'm doing a deadlift or a different movement like that. Another really good way to train your grip strength is by doing dead hangs. So if you're really into doing pull-ups, that's great because you get those pulling motions, and we're going to talk about that next. But just hanging on a pull-up bar and just basically dangling there for as long as you can is another great assessment of your grip strength. The longer you can hang there, the higher your grip strength is. Now, this is something you don't have to do every single day, but I like to incorporate this into some of my workouts, especially my back workouts, where in the middle of it, I'll just go hang on the pull-up bar as long as I can, and then next week, I'll try to beat last week's time. Now, why exactly is grip strength so important specifically? Well, surprisingly, there's a ton of literature on specifically how strong your grip strength is, or basically how hard you can squeeze something. And basically what the research is showing is the higher your grip strength is, then the lower your risk of dying is. Now, the problem is that right now, Americans have a much weaker grip strength than we did a generation ago. In 1985, men between the ages of 20 and 24 had an average grip strength of about 121 pounds. Now, if you fast forward to 2015, those same age group men have an average grip strength of only 101 pounds. Now, this is kind of surprising because there's so many more gym memberships opening up and so many different ways to start working out, but we're still getting weaker. Now, after looking more into this, I think the real problem is people have just gotten lazier. I know a lot of people that have gotten really comfortable with their work from home job and basically being able to constantly be in front of their computer and playing video games and just being at home all the time and not really getting out and hitting the gym. Now, another thing that you should focus on, and this is something you should focus on every single workout, is focusing on both eccentric and concentric movements. So most people know what the concentric movement is. It's basically when you go up with your bench press or when you curl up that bicep curl. It's basically when your muscle is getting shorter and it's contracting. Now, the eccentric movement is the exact opposite. This is when your muscle is lengthening. So this is when you're putting down that dumbbell, or this is when after you do a deadlift, you're putting that weight down. Or after you do a bicep curl, you're bringing that weight back down. Now, the reason that your eccentric strength is so important is because your eccentric strength is something that most people lack as they get older. Your eccentric strength is the strength that you need to basically help give you more control of your body. So if you want to make this more practical, for an elderly person, their strength when they're coming down the stairs to be able to control their body weight down the stairs, that's more of an eccentric movement. And also these eccentric movements will help prevent us from falling down, which we've seen is the leading cause of death, of accidental death, in people 65 and older. Now, the cool thing about eccentric and concentric movements is you don't have to change your workout to focus on it. I focus on the eccentric movements on pretty much every single workout. So not every single rep of every single set, but there's some workouts where I focus on both the concentric, where I'm pushing the weight or pulling the weight, whatever I'm doing, and then focusing on the down movement. So for example, if I'm doing a row, I'll row the weight and then I'll come down to like a 5-second count. So I'll count to 5 in my head, and then by the time I count to 5, then I'll pull back up. Now you can do the same thing when you're doing a deadlift or when you're doing a bench press, whatever. I think every single movement, it will definitely benefit you. Now at the same time, sometimes I focus on explosive movements. Sometimes I focus on pushing the weight as hard as I can and as fast as I can. That's a totally different style of workout, and I don't think you need to incorporate to those styles of workouts, but I think in general, in any workout, you can find ways to include eccentric movements. Now, the next thing that you need to focus on is pulling motions. Now, the reason that pulling motions are so important is because your pulling motions are one of the most practical movements that you do when you get older. If you think about it, most of the different movements that you're doing throughout the day are pulling movements. So if you're pulling a door open, or if you're unloading your groceries, or if you're picking something up off the floor, all of these are pulling motions in some sort of way. So one of my favorite workouts to do is pull-ups, and this will also help with your dead hangs and your grip strength. So it's kind of like a twofold attack on your strength. And also rowing. So rowing machines are great, but also just any rowing movements during your back workouts. So I personally like to do a back workout and specifically focus on my pulling motions about 2 times a week. Now, the last focus of strength I want to talk about is your legs. Now, one of the reasons that focusing on your legs is so important is because it houses 2 of the biggest muscles in your body, your hamstrings and your glutes. And if you focus on these 2 muscles, it's really going to help prevent you from getting injured, specifically injuries to your spine. Now, when you're working out these muscles, let's say you're doing a stiff-legged deadlift or something, you want to focus on not bending your spine. You want to keep your spine straight and only move your body at the hips. Now, I'm not going to go into detail on how to do different workouts because there's a ton of good programs online. I'm sure you can find things on YouTube or different videos on YouTube how to do a proper deadlift or a proper squat. So I don't want to go into detail on that. But the other reason that legs are so important is it's also so practical. Just being able to pick up things off the floor or get up out of a chair. When you're older, this is really going to help you. So there's a ton of different ways to target your legs, but you want to make sure you target those 2 muscles specifically when you're working out, your hamstrings and your glutes. So some simple ways to do that are doing the squats or deadlifts or step ups where you step up onto a chair and step back down. All of these are targeting those 2 big muscles. Now, obviously, I'm not telling you to not focus on your quads or your calves or your other muscles in your legs. Those are still important too, but those 2 muscles, your glutes and your hamstrings, are the most important when it comes to being practical with your day-to-day life. Why is it that so many people are scared to lift weights as they get older? Could they just be lazy? Some people might be, but I think a more likely reason is that they're scared to get injured. According to the CDC, over 27% of Americans over the age of 45 suffer from chronic pain. Now, big one here is back pain, and this is a big part of the opioid crisis and why so many opioids have been prescribed, and this is a leading cause for disability in so many people. And actually, it's a leading cause of disability around the world. But the problem is that if you're scared to work out and you don't work out, it will only increase your likelihood of getting injured in the future. And not only that, it'll help speed up the decline of any muscle loss and bone problems you get as you get older as well. Like I said, our muscle mass and our muscle strength will start to decline in our 30s, and this will only get worse as we age. So every single decade, we'll start to lose our muscle strength, and this will rapidly start increasing the older that we get. Not only that, our bone density will also decline as we get older. And our bone density only peaks at about our late 20s. And this will kind of continue similar to our loss of muscle mass, and it'll continue to accelerate the older that we get. Now, if you want to make sure you don't get injured, and you can also do a lot of the things that you want to do when you get older, you need to make sure you have enough muscle mass and specifically muscle strength to do those things. But to do that, you need to be able to exercise regularly and work out regularly and do that in a safe way so that you don't get injured. Now, this is where stability training comes in, and this is where stability is so important. Now, when you focus on your stability, it's not just about maxing out and doing as much weight as you can every single workout, because the reality is that most people will cheat in their workouts, where they're doing a weight that's too heavy and they'll use their body's natural cheats and they'll do a more unnatural movement to get that weight up. And I'm guilty of this too. A lot of times I'll go too heavy and I just want to get the weight up and say that I did this heavy weight, and I'll cheat in a certain way. The problem is, if you do this over time and you continue to do this, this is what eventually will lead to an injury. So if this sounds like you want to take a step back and focus on your body and make sure you're moving in the right way so that you don't get injured. So really the way I look at this is you want to be working hard, but you also want to be working smart at the same time. Even sudden injuries like a torn ACL aren't always so sudden. Most of the time, it's because of some weakness in the joint and a problem with the stability of the joint that was the true cause of that torn ACL. It's kind of like someone who gets a heart attack. A lot of times, people who suddenly die from a heart attack, they don't actually suddenly die from it. That disease has actually been going on in their body for 2 decades before that happens. Now, what does it mean to be stable? In a nutshell, it means to be able to handle your weight. Now, if we're just talking about your body weight, it's being able to stop and slow down in a safe way without really thinking too much about it. Just being comfortable with your own weight. So in other words, it's really about being dynamic. So let's picture a guy who's a bodybuilder in the gym, and they're really good at working out. They can pick up these really big weights and they can squat really heavy, but that's really all they can do. If you ask them to go run a few laps on the track, they probably will really struggle. On the other hand, let's say someone who looks really lean, and one day they can go sprint up and down a basketball court, then the other day they can go run up a mountain, the other day they can go put up heavy weights in the gym, and they can deadlift twice their body weight. That person is a lot more stable and has a lot more stability and is a lot more dynamic. So think of someone like LeBron James. This is someone who can generate a ton of force in a very safe way and also prevent himself from getting injured. Now, the biggest thing when it comes to stability training is basically rethinking your mindset when it comes to the gym. You don't want to be coming in with the mindset of, I want to crush these weights no matter what. Sometimes that's good, but if you are working out in an unsafe way where you're moving your body in directions where it's not supposed to, then it's going to lead to an injury and you're not being stable. Now, the biggest things when it comes to stability training is 1, not cheating during your workouts. Number 2 is to focus on balancing. Number 3 is to focus on your breathing. And number 4 is to engage your core. So one way to do this is, first of all, watch yourself when you're working out. So if you have a partner, that's great. Ask him or her to watch you as you're working out and see if you're doing any weird movements or basically your body doesn't look even in some sort of way. You can even have them record you. Another way to do this is to set up a tripod and actually record yourself during your workout. You don't have to be that annoying gym person who tells people to move out of the way when you're working out, and when they get in front of your camera, you only have to do this for a couple sets of different workouts to really see how your body moves. And what you might find is you might be surprised at how your body's moving, because I tried doing this and I tried having my partner record me while I was working out, and I realized that I was moving my hips in a weird direction during some of my workouts. And also, next time you're at the gym, you can even look around you and see how often do you see people who are cheating or not actually working out in a proper movement when they're in the gym. So first off, you want to focus on balancing your feet. So basically, think of your feet as 4 different corners. So you want to make sure that all 4 corners of your feet are balanced during your workout. So let's say you are doing a squat or a deadlift. The first thing you want to focus on is your feet position and make sure that your feet are evenly planted on the ground. If you're leaning towards one side, then you're already at a disadvantage because you're already not doing this in a stable way. You can also practice balancing on one leg at a time and seeing how long you can balance on each leg. Now, another way to focus on your balance training is doing step-ups. But instead of just focusing on the concentric, or where you're actually moving your body up, also focusing on the eccentric. So I mentioned that before, the importance of your eccentric movements. So basically, when you're stepping up on a chair, as you come down a little slower and focus on that movement. So one example of this would be every time you step up, come down to a 3-second count instead of just coming down right away. And then repeat this on your other leg. Now, the next thing you want to focus on with stability training is your breath. Your breath is a lot more important than just getting air in and out of your lungs. Simply changing your breathing can help you become more stable, but also change your entire workout and make your whole workout more efficient. One example to help show the importance of your breath is if someone were to chronically overbreathe or breathe too quickly, then that person is going to be way more anxious because they are engaging their sympathetic nervous system. Your sympathetic nervous system is basically your body's fight or flight response. So if someone is breathing too quickly, they're going to be in a state of chronic stress. At the same time, if someone is breathing way less and a lot less than that other person, they're going to be in a state of calm and relax, which is your parasympathetic mode. And also the way that you breathe is going to affect your posture. So someone who is a regular mouth breather, someone who breathes through their mouth all the time, and they only use their upper half of their chest to breathe, they're going to be more likely to have a bad posture and their head's going to be tilted forward. And that's going to really throw off their body's stability. Really what you want to focus on when you're breathing is creating more intra-abdominal pressure. Basically what that means is you're filling up your entire lungs with air. So there's 2 things you need to focus on to do this. One is using your nose, and number 2 is engaging your diaphragm. Now, if you're doing a very intense workout, you don't have to be breathing through your nose. It's okay to take shallower breaths through your mouth. I'm not really focusing on that. If you want to focus on your stability and your breathing, it's best to really focus on it when you're relaxing at home. So one way to do this is to lie on your back, have your knees bent, and place one hand right above your belly button and one hand right over your chest. And as you breathe in, see which hand is rising. If just your upper hand or the hand over your chest is rising, then you're not breathing correctly because you're only using the upper half of your chest or the upper half of your lungs to breathe. And this is going to lead to you breathing really shallow and non-efficient breaths. What you want to focus on is engaging your diaphragm. And the way to do that is to basically have that belly kind of stick out when you're breathing. Now, when you're initially learning to engage your diaphragm, it's okay to really focus on engaging your belly. But otherwise, when you're normally breathing, you don't want to make it so obvious. You want this breathing to be really subtle, where it's going into your lungs and it's engaging your diaphragm and your belly is extending, but you don't want it to be very noticeable. You want it to be kind of subtle. And also, you want to be breathing very silently. So if you are making a lot of noise when you are breathing, then again, that's a sign that you're not breathing correctly. So another way to help engage your diaphragm is to actually put a little bit of resistance. So now with your hands over your body, try to basically push against your stomach as it's expanding. So now you're going to feel like it's a little bit harder to breathe in because you're basically preventing your belly from extending. But this is a really good way to train yourself to engage your diaphragm when you're breathing. Now, the good thing about engaging your diaphragm when you're breathing is your diaphragm will help disperse this air all across your lungs. So basically, it's going to make your air exchange a lot more efficient. And also, this is going to help improve your posture and make sure that you have a proper posture. And this is really going to translate to any workout that you're doing. Now, also, if you're breathing incorrectly, there is evidence that shows that this can directly lead to an injury. In one study, they found that when they combined a breathing challenge or made it harder for people to breathe, and they combined it with weight training, they had a harder time of stabilizing their spine. So basically what that means is if someone is breathing poorly, then they're going to have a much harder time of preventing injuries. So for example, let's say someone is shoveling snow on their driveway and they're breathing poorly. That person is going to be at an increased risk of having a spine injury just because they're not breathing correctly. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is engaging your core. Now, working out your core is not something you have to do every single workout, but I think you should try to engage it about 2 to 3 times a week. The reason your core is so important is because when you have a stronger core, it can again prevent you from getting injured. Because your core kind of serves 2 functions. One, it can prevent excess load on the spine, and also it can help transfer load from the bottom half of your body to the upper half of your body. So there's a lot of different workouts that can help engage your core. Some of them are obvious, like planks or different types of sit-ups, but also squats and deadlifts, and I'm sure you can find a bunch online if you search on YouTube and find some great core workouts. So I'm not going to give you a full core workout, but definitely find ways to engage it during your workouts. America has an obesity epidemic. Right now, it has become normal for us to be unhealthy. Let me show you. In the late 1970s, the average adult male in America weighed 173 pounds. Right now, the average adult male weighs close to 200 pounds.